that changed my entire mentality around money.
All right, welcome to Your Money, Your Rules, where real people share real strategies that build legacies. I'm your host, Teresa Villaruz, and today's episode is about unlocking business ownership using smart funding strategies and expert guidance. Now, this episode is brought to you by Thrive Banking. Most people were taught to chase income and not build systems. That's why even high earners feel stuck, working harder, saving more, but still trading time for money. Now, inside the Thrive movement, we're changing it up, helping people unlock capital, become real estate investors, and fund purpose-driven projects, even if they felt overlooked or left behind. It's not about having more money. It's about having more control and using leverage to increase your net return by 1 to 2 percentage points just by adding one step to how your money flows. For more information about Thrive Movement, go to thrivebankingstrategies.com. Link is also in the description of this video. Now, speaking of leverage, today's guest is Jasdev Kailey, a sharp business underwriter and funder of AcquireWise. He's on a mission to help 1,000 people become business owners through SBA-backed acquisitions, opening doors for those who never thought ownership was possible. Jazz doesn't just underwrite deals, he also unlocks opportunities. And when he's not helping clients get funded, he's actively building his own portfolio. So he's doing what he's telling, right? If you've ever dreamed of owning a business but didn't know where to start, you're going to want to hear this. Now, Jazz, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you.
To start off, I'd like to ask, what's one money decision you've made, whether that's good or bad, that completely changed how you think about wealth?
Okay. I'll kind of go a little bit traditional or kind of you might not expect this. Honestly, going to college was an investment, and I had one class specifically I can remember to this day. It was before I picked to major in finance. It was just an elective class. It was personal financial, something like that. And that single class changed my entire mindset on money. It was really the first time where somebody showed me money as a tool rather than money as just being like currency. And it was like this thought that I can have cash and just place it somewhere else and it will build like there's a return on that cash without me doing anything. And so simple nowadays, and obviously I understand it so much more and we're all talking about it, but it was just like I can remember that being the first time I thought that way. And yeah, I know college isn't for everybody and blah blah blah, but like that one and like being in that class, I don't know what we paid for that semester, but like that changed my entire mentality around money. And then obviously learning from that point on and reading books and listening from everybody else. Now like I have a deeper understanding on that, but I would say like that was that first time like something changed in my mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned that college is not for everyone. I think it's also because, you have to be intentional in terms of, why are you going to college,
Yeah.
right? You mentioned
Yeah.
that it's an investment, right? And when
Exactly.
you did go there, you did pick like classes that are you were intention about like what
hmm
classes you had to pick and all that stuff. So that's great. Now you're an SBA consultant slash
Sure.
business underwriter, right?
hmm
Can you expand a little bit more about what that means and
Okay.
why people need to
Yeah.
learn more about them?
Okay. I'll kind of go back into like why SBA specifically, and it goes back to my previous W-2. So I worked in commercial banking. After I finished college, got my MBA, then I got into a banking job, and I worked my way into the SBA department there. And it was a perfect match. It was not planned. I'll tell you this. I got out of college. I'm like, I gotta take the first job I can possibly take. I was more in that, and I don't know, like the world aligned or stars aligned or something, because I got this SBA job and and I come from a small business family. We've always owned businesses. So, you know, being in the SBA was like a perfect match because I love small business. But again, I would have taken a job as a teller. Like I just got so lucky. So I got a job in the SBA department, and then um, I was a loan underwriter. So I had to analyze the businesses, I had to structure the deals, I did know all the SBA rules, blah blah blah, so on and like the whole thing. And I would underwrite the deals, and I did that for a few years, and I got to a point where I led a whole team. I was training the underwriters, I was making credit decisions, and helping create policies, and then kind of going back from my parents and what they do. I had a lot of their family friends would call me and ask me, hey, what do you think about this business? Hey, what do you think how do I get a loan for this? And it's just my immigrant parents telling all their friends and family that my son does this, my son does this. So then they would just call me, and I was like, man, I gotta, there might be a potential here to kind of use the skills I learned in my W-2 to kind of help other people. And kind of fast forward to today, that's where I really focus in on. I help people either through business underwriting, and I honestly, I didn't learn anything new. I take my strict commercial banking standards of underwriting and just apply them here. So people get a fully, like full-fledged underwriting, how an SBA lender would have done it anyways. And then also, just because I know all the SBA rules, I also do SBA consulting. That's kind of the long story how I ended up here. And now I kind of do that for potential buyers of businesses. And just currently, if somebody has a business they already own, and they want SBA financing, I typically consult them too.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's great that you've taken what the knowledge, experience, and skills that you've accumulated while working at W-2 and then transitioning that into your own business. That's awesome. Now, one question that I have for you is because you mentioned that you're helping your parents, friends, and family who are
Yeah.
thinking about jumping into business ownership and would like to get funded and things like that. What would you say what would you say is makes SBA loans like one, the most powerful tool right now? And then two is after that, what is the most common mistakes that people do when applying for an SBA loan?
Sure. I'll say SBA is really powerful. I'll start off by saying this. I help people, and me included, as I'm looking, I'm buying businesses myself. I actually don't go SBA as a first option. The first option I do is I go creative. I try
Mm.
to go creative, right? Seller financing, potential earnout structures, whatever else I can do first. Um, Usually there's a lot less headache that way. You can probably structure terms a lot better if the seller's willing to do it that way. You're just taking a whole element out of the buying process out. You don't have to really go talk to lenders and get funding, and you save a lot of time and headache that way. Now, the truth is that that can't be done all the time. And when that can't be done, where do you look for? And it's very difficult to find, private money lenders. It's very difficult to find any other sort of funding outside of SBA. Even other banks like non-SBA, just regular commercial loans. It's hard. And there's a reason for that. It's because nobody wants to give money to something where there's no real collateral. It's not a mortgage where you can just take the house back, right, as the lender. There might be some equipment, there might be a few things, but there's not really much. Now, the caveat to that is if you're buying a commercial real estate type of business, if you're buying a gas station or something, there's some real estate, yeah, okay, you might be able to get some other loans. So SB is powerful because it ends up being the only option sometimes. If you can't go creative, you have to go SBA. And kind of leading into what are some of the mistakes people do is SBA is, unfortunately, it's a very difficult process. It just is. I can't hide it. I don't ever try to hide that from anybody else. This is why it gets kind of a bad rep. Now, it's it's very difficult for a few reasons. One is you go to a bank and you ask them, hey, can I get an SBA loan? So now there's all these bank rules and policies you have to follow. But now SBA is also backed by the federal government. That's the whole reason why SBA is a thing, and I can go into details later. But now there's a bunch of SBA rules on top of the bank rules. So you have two layers of rules you got to go through, two layers of just two entities you got to make happy before you get approved for the loan. So not knowing the rules ahead of time really can hurt you because depending on who the bank person you speak to first, typically they're some sort of salesperson and they just want their commission check. So they're gonna say, hey, let's just try it. Let's just see what happens. I mean, they're not gonna tell you that, but I've seen it on the back end. They're just throwing stuff, on the underwriter's desk on the back, 'cause this is what happens to me all the time, right? I just get like, hey, we can't even do this. Like, why are you bringing this to me? But on the other side of that, there is a potential buyer waiting there for 2, 3 weeks, waiting for an answer, and and they wasted time because they didn't know the rules. And this is where if you know somebody that knows the rules, who can kind of pre-flight the deal, who can kind of structure it, so you kind of know yourself. This is probably the payment I'm going to look at. They are going to take my personal home as collateral. You have to be okay with that too, because the bank might not tell you till later down the road. And again, this is just what delays. So knowing the rules up front sets expectations. And then also, it, you're not wasting the bank's time and your own time. So if you have to pivot, you can pivot quicker rather than now waiting 3 weeks in, 6 weeks in, and now the seller's angry because you haven't got your funding done and whatever. So you got to be quick when you're buying businesses. So knowing the rules up front, I say not knowing the rules up front is the biggest mistake.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you mentioned go creative first before
Hmm.
to SBA loans. And I think when we met, we had a discussion about me and my husband opening up our boba cafe here in Monterey.
Yeah,
But the process has already started there, right? And
sure.
I asked you about, can we get started on the SBA loan? And
Yeah.
you mentioned that it might not be smart right now when we needed the money immediately. It might be a better move if we do it after we've had the cafe open for at least a year, right? Now,
Hmm.
so I did take your advice. I went creative first.
Okay.
And now, the startup cost of our boba cafe, part of that is being funded by my Thrive banking policy. Second is I also did capital raising, right?
Amazing.
Now for businesses, let's just say, when they first thought about getting an SBA loan, but can't do it right now because they needed the money first, right? What
Hmm.
are some of, you mentioned a few earlier, but can you dive in a little bit more in terms of like what are the creative ways to get those funding first? And then maybe after that, talk about what 1 year down the road when they could show revenue from that business, what's the process then to getting that SBA loan and what can they use that for?
Okay. So one, so I primarily focus on acquisitions, and I don't want to go through the whole Cody Sanchez type of reasons why, acquiring an existing business is better. But let's just say we're all on the same page that acquiring existing is better. So if you're looking at an existing business, the number one go-to thing is try to do seller financing. Okay, so with seller financing, the seller is basically acting as the bank. They're going to give an IOU, right? Like, hey, we'll sell you this, and you just make payments to us. Like, you'll take complete ownership of that business most of the time. You'll own 100%. Now you just owe them the money. There's reasons why it's benefit to the seller as well. They have to pay less taxes. They can kind of spread that out, and they can get now income over so many years, and they might like that, they may not. That's just conversations to be had during the buying process. So I like seller. There's some other things I did mention to go kind of creative. I like earnouts, but earnouts, if you were to structure an earnout with a SBA loan, you'll have a lot of trouble. Earnouts is typically where it's a creative way to structure a deal. It's almost like, hey, I'll buy your business for $100,000 if it hits this revenue. And if it doubles in revenue, like the seller's probably trying to convince me, hey, this business it's gonna grow. I promise you it's gonna grow. And you go, okay, if you promise me and you want to put money on the line, I will buy the business for this set amount if we hit this much revenues. And then if it hits a double, I'll owe you even more money and more. So it's actually the purchase price can fluctuate depending on the performance of the business. That's another creative way, and that can actually help you. So um, you would always want to do it to the benefit of yourself. So if the business does not perform like they said it was going to perform and how they promised you it was going to perform, they're owed less money. This is another creative way of doing it. So those are a few creative ways. Again, seller financing. And I'm sorry, I know what was the next question as well?
Yeah, I'll ask you that question, but this is kind of interesting.
Okay, go ahead.
So I know that part of your offering is business acquisition underwriting,
Hmm.
right? So that is something that people would want to know more about because, there's a lot of people there that want to underwrite it themselves.
Sure, sure.
And, they're still in that kind of like mindset. Why would I hire someone when I've watched so many YouTube videos to
Yeah,
properly underwrite a business?
yeah,
Why would sh why would someone should hire someone like you who
yeah,
does this as a business versus doing the underwriting based on like what they found on YouTube University?
yeah. That's funny. I use YouTube University all the time too. Um, the reason why is this. I have underwritten someone like me. It doesn't have to be me. Someone like me, you can hire a CPA, you can hire somebody else kind of in this field. People like us have seen a bunch of different industries, one, because of our background. We've seen a lot of deals. No business is alike, and being able to identify red flags is huge. And if you haven't seen a lot of deals, you don't know what may be a red flag and what may not be a red flag. I'll actually give you two examples. You may see something on a P&L and go, hey, I think this is a red flag. Hey, like, I don't know why this expense is so high. And then you stop, as being a buyer, you stop and you think about it for 2, 3 business days. You're trying to do research on it. But somebody like me would have been like, hey, the explanation is probably this. You're wasting your time. Move on to the next big thing because and so you wasted time spending just trying to worrying about this one thing where somebody who's seen hundreds of deals could be like, hey, that's not something to worry about. Now, the other thing is you may gloss over something and you go, hey, everything looks good. But then I go, hey, did you not notice, your margin is shrinking over the last 3 years? Like, we do need to stop and pause and really look at this. And that comes with experience. So just having the eye of being able to identify, strengths in a deal, weaknesses in a deal, that is huge. That is huge. And one reason why I do this actually because I love it. I promise you, I love this. My parents come from this background. Anytime I help somebody, I get so much joy out of helping somebody get into the first business. But there's an ugly side to this. And I've seen that way too many times working. Um, Again, this comes from my banking experience. I had to make the phone calls when people weren't making their payments.
Mm.
I had to say, hey, we are going to take your house back. And they would tell me, okay, we're gonna have to file bankruptcy. And it was such a horrible phone call, and I have so many stories on this. And if they just did more due diligence up front, because most of the time it's the issues that they are having today, which is maybe 6 months after the acquisition, 18 months after, 24 months, there were um, you could have probably seen it during the due diligence all the way in the beginning when they acquired it. You start looking at the numbers, you start asking the right questions, the proper questions to the brokers and sellers. Hey, what's going on? Why are you selling? Why are these expenses going this way? And why are the numbers going this way? Are your contracts sticky? Like, are your clients going to stick around? Are there contracts? Like, there's so many other ways to kind of mitigate certain weaknesses up front. So knowing in the beginning, before you've committed to the deal, before you bought the deal, you want to know as much information up front because you don't. It gets really ugly afterwards if the deal goes bad because it's not like a house you could just liquidate. You can put it on the market, sell it for 25% under market and just get out of it, right? Just take a quick L and get out. Like once you have a business that's not cash flowing anymore or there's a bunch of problems, you may not be able to sell. And if you owe a lot of people a lot of money, it's not good. So I still love small business ownership, but it is a very risky thing. So to have more people on your side, the better, right? So
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
main thing.
Absolutely, because then you might be thinking about, okay, I'm gonna save this much money by not hiring like an underwriter, but in the long run,
Yeah,
it could be a lot more costly
yeah,
if you didn't do it right, right? So,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Now, the follow-up question is, you mentioned that to me before, and also telling me that, for my scenario, and which might be the same scenario for a lot of business owners right now, is that maybe wait to apply for an
Sure.
SBA loan when
Yeah.
you have proof of revenue ready. Maybe that's a year or 2 years down the
Yeah.
road.
Yeah.
Now, the question then is like what would that process look like, and what do you typically tell people how you could use this fund, right? Because this can't be just you're trying to build a business. It's more about like what are you going to use this for?
Sure. So there's a lot of I think the best thing to do is when you're acquiring a business, starting a business like you are, the more tools you have, the better. So I know you talk about Thrive Banking and you had tools to get in, and I advised you at that time. I said, hey, you're doing a startup. This is not an environment right now where banks are really lending to startups. You have other tools to get the project done, right? So let's get the project done. And in a year or two, when we have now, this is now not a startup loan that we're going to look for. We're actually going to have an existing business that is profitable, that does cash flow. Now a bank looks at you and they go, hey, you are a strong applicant. You're not just a startup where there's no proof and whatever. Now, startups are SBA eligible. I will tell you that. It's just the environment we are in today. Banks are just a little bit more restrictive, so you have a harder time getting those types of loans. Not impossible, just harder. So that's when I advised you that we could probably do, if you can wait out a year, even better 2 years, and you show proof that the business is doing well, then we go back to the SBA and say, hey, we want a working capital loan. Now you go back and then you can get a lump sum money back out depending on the there's a lot more details in it and I can help you with that, but so you kind of what you do is you delay the process, and then now you have an existing business, and you're as an existing business now you want an SBA loan for whatever. Maybe you want new equipment now, maybe you want um, maybe you just need money to pay some certain expenses. So that's like the working capital I was talking to you about. You get a lump sum up front and it's amortized over 10 years. Now, if you're acquiring in a business, you can also play this too, in a way. You can do a seller financing note, and oh, I will always structure seller financing with no prepayment penalty. Tell the seller, if I prepay this off early, you can't penalize me. Now, whether that's on there or not, it's fine. But what I would try to do later on down the road, whether it's a year or two, SBA allows you to do debt refinance. So now if you have a seller note, you can, a year down the line, once you've taken over and shown that, hey, this is going well, you can approach an SBA bank and say, hey, I have the seller note. I want to refi this debt. So, take care of this one. Let's get the seller out of this now, and let's have a new loan to refi it with SBA. And typically, depending on, if there's no real estate, now you got a whole 10 years that you probably spread this over. Because when I'm speaking to sellers, even for myself, when I'm looking at businesses or helping clients and we're speaking to their sellers, nobody wants to amortize it over 10 years, right? They want to get paid back pretty quickly, even if they're open to it. So sometimes they'll do like a 3 year, maybe a 5 year, but SBA allows you to refi that later down the road at 10 years. So you can always do that. That's an option. Now you will still have to go through the same underwriting to make sure the business can cash flow and whatnot. So to have somebody underwrite the deal still or pre-flight it would be helpful, but that's always an option too. And that's kind of how I'm going for my personal acquisitions. I will, even if the seller is willing to do a 3 year, 5 year, I don't mind doing that just to get into the business, knowing that I know the SBA rules on the back end that I could, with high certainty, get this refied out later at a 10-year note.
Yeah, that's good. There's a lot of things there, right?
Yeah.
Which is great because then, it just shows that there's a lot of things that you need to think about when applying
Hmm.
for an SBA loan or even underwriting a business.
Yeah.
So, obviously there's not like we only have a limited time right now,
Sure.
and giving all these, unpacking all of this is going to take more than
Yeah.
time allows.
Take a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So then tell the audience, like, where can people find you if they want help with their SBA deals, or,
Sure.
or even like underwriting their next business purchase?
Sure. I'm most active on Instagram, so at Jasdev Kailey. find me there. You'll see me post some tips and tricks on business buying, SBA updates, because the rules are always constantly changing, and just some personal stuff. If you want to see some longer form underwriting stuff, I am trying to provide value to everybody. So I did just start my YouTube channel. It's also at Jasdev Kailey, and there you'll kind of see longer form, more deeper underwriting, just if you're curious and want to know and whatnot. So those are my two social medias. I'm really active on there. So especially Instagram, send me a DM if you have a business, you're ready to go, or you're looking at an SBA loan, and let's talk.
Awesome. So that's at Jasdev Kailey on Instagram and YouTube, and you can
And
see
YouTube.
it underneath his name on this video.
Yeah.
And I'll also put that in the description or the notes section of this video as well. So huge thanks to Jazz Kailey for joining us today. If you're thinking about buying a business, his underwriting approach and SBA loan guidance could save you not just time, but money and headaches as well.
Yeah.
Right? So please go ahead and contact him. He's giving you the two social medias where you could actually reach out to him, Instagram and YouTube. And if you're curious how Thrive Banking helps business owners and investors grow their money smarter and safer, check out the link in the show notes. Until next time, take control, build a legacy, and remember, your money, your rules.